Creating community at the beginning of the year is critical to ensuring that your students feel as though that they are in a safe and welcoming environment for helping them to learn, no matter where they are in the learning process. So in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a very simple process that I take my students through at the beginning of the year to create community. Research tells us that creating community at the beginning of the year can dramatically increase student outcomes. In fact, there is one research that shows establishing a positive, consistent, and cooperative learning environment through the use of 1. Classroom and instructional organization and planning. 2. Teacher and student cooperatively developed discipline components, such as a co-constructed constitution. And 3. Parent and community involvement appears to influence instructional outcomes. And this can be any sort of subject that you're working with. If you have those items in place inside of your classroom at the start of the year, it creates an environment that everyone is excited to learn in, they understand the expectations, and they all know what they're working towards. And so having that classroom co-constructed constitution or mission vision statement, whatever you want to call it at the beginning of the year, is really just a statement that articulates why we are all here in the first place inside of that classroom. And so I started creating these very early on in my education career, and they've definitely evolved over the years. And the year that I left the classroom, it was my final year in the classroom. It was my favorite way of building a co-constructed classroom mission and vision statement. So I want to walk you through what this process looks like so that you can do this inside of your own classroom. So the first thing that I will tell you is that this should probably be done over the course of about 3 days. You don't want to try to do all of this in one go because it will be a very, very long lesson. And so you want to make sure you're keeping students engaged. And because this is really the teacher that's kind of directing all of it, there is not as much student engagement in this process, but it's still critical for them to have their voice heard throughout the discussion of creating their co-construction mission vision statement. So the first thing that I would do on the very, very first day is talk about your school's mission and vision statement. And so what I have here are going to be legal size cardstock pages. You can get a very giant pack off of Amazon, and I will leave a link down in the description for you to go and check out the one that I purchased. And the cardstock is great because it's going to create that durability. So you can move it around your classroom, you can display it whatever you need it, and it's going to be pretty easy for you to manage. I also liked using legal size paper because it's not as big. And I don't know about y'all, but I was in a classroom that didn't have a ton of wall space between the cabinets and the windows, which I'm not arguing about the windows. But because I didn't have as much wall space, it was really hard for me to use the giant chart paper sizes. And so I liked to either use a legal size cardstock that I was able to print on to give me some form of a basis for how I was constructing my anchor charts, or you can use those really large pieces of construction paper. And those are a little bit bigger than the legal size cardstock pages. And so what I did is I took my school's mission and vision statement. Now, this one is going to be a little bit different because it had a lot of terms that dealt with the school that I was located in. So I just omitted those from there. But you can kind of see here's what it's all about. Now, the biggest thing is that on the first day, you want to talk about what is a school's mission vision statement. And what are some of those words that we see that are really important as we start to kind of work through this process? So I'm going to show you some of the words that my students ended up picking out that they felt as though were really critical and important to understanding the mission and vision statement for the school. Is that mission and vision statement for the school that I was working with, again, on that legal size cardstock paper. And some of the things that my students really wanted to pull out was the word communities. So I would just kind of articulate and circle with these little cloud the word communities. And I like to do this as we start to talk through this or talk through the mission and vision statement, because it makes things a little bit more visual for them. The other thing that they noticed when we were going through this is the word prepare. They felt as though that word prepare was really critical to understanding. So I could take this and just kind of create this little emphasis on that word prepare. The other word that they felt was important is the word all. So I also felt like that one was critical. So I made sure to really circle and bold that in that process. And then I had the word greatest potential. So that was another one that my students wanted to pick up on, was their greatest potential. So we kind of added some squigglies there for that one. And then we also had the word responsible, which was important to them. And then productive. So we added some highlights to that. So on that very first day, really the only things that we're doing is talking about what a mission and vision statement does, the importance of it, and looking at the mission and vision statement for the school district or for your school. You could choose whichever one works best for you. And then going through and just having a discussion about identifying those words that are the most critical. And the reason why this is so important is that when we move over into them creating their own mission and vision statement, these words that we're pointing out here are going to play a big role in how we craft that statement. That I did forget to mention is that when I did this with my students, I actually had an entire vlog video, which I'm going to link for you. So if you want to go check out that vlog where I share a little bit more about this process, then you're welcome to go and watch that video itself. But this is going to be just a more quickly condensed version of how to implement this inside of your own classroom. So that was day one, is just looking at the mission and vision statement for the school or the district that you work for, having a discussion of what it means, and then what are some of those keywords that we can really pull apart. The next day is where the magic starts to happen. And this is the day where students are crafting and coming up with different ideas and words that go along with their mission and vision statement, or what they're going to be adding to their mission and vision statement. So that's probably the hardest part, is like, what are we putting inside of it? So you can almost think of this as like a graphic organizer for creating the mission vision statement that you're going to write together with your students. So I'm going to take you and show the other anchors, which are going to be these. Again, I just printed these onto some legal size cardstock. When I did this inside of my classroom, I believe I used chart paper and I had it up on my board. But if you don't have a ton of space and you want to be able to hold these up for a little bit, then you can just use this version. If you are within the community, I do have these versions available for you starting today. So you can head over into the monthly resources to go and grab these printables. So very simple, legal size cardstock, printing them out onto your printer. That way you can use them over and over again. One of the other things I did add to this is, if you can see here, there are a very light lines that allows you to be able to write on them. And what's so nice about that is that if you are anybody like me and you are really particular about the way that you write, this is going to be nice and helpful, because I can get sloppy really, really quick, especially when students are just calling out words rapidly, which is what they're going to do in this process. So let's take a look at what this is going to sound like and feel like as you start to go through this with your students. Okay, so at this point, we are now looking at creating some of the words and terms for that will kind of help guide us in creating our mission vision statement. So to do this, what you will need to have are 4 different anchor charts, and you want to use them in the order that I'm showing them to you here. So the first anchor chart is going to have the question, why do we come to school? Very basic. You're not adding anything else to the anchor chart, just why do we come to school? The next anchor chart is going to ask, why do we want to learn, which is really important. The next one is going to ask, why do we want to move on in life or go to college? And then the final one reads, why do we want to be a successful to be successful and a better person. So all of these are going to be questions that we are asking for our students to be thinking about during this process. So what does this look like when students are calling things out? So I start with one anchor chart at a time. I did have all of these displayed on my Blackboard when I was doing this with them, but I wanted them to think about it. So when I did this with my students, I would ask them the question and I gave them about a minute to think about it just to themselves. And then from there, I had them turn and talk. So they were turning and talking with one another, and then I allowed them to be able to share out. So when they were sharing out, I did this with my team teacher so that we had the same co-constructed mission and vision statement for both of our classes. So she was helping to guide and calling on students, whereas I was the one who was doing all of the writing. So I would say, somebody might say to learn. Okay, great. So I would write to learn. The next person might say to go to college, to go to college. The next person might say to see friends. And these are all responses that I genuinely got from my students: to see teachers, to have fun, and then to think about what we want to do when we grow up to get smarter. Now, you might have somebody who gives you a response that is similar to one of the responses that you have up here. So for example, we had a student who said, get an education, which is great, but that's pretty similar to learn. So up here, I just did a slash and did to get an education. And so we would do this for every single chart paper. You can see why it's important to split this up between days. So on this day, we're only just jotting down ideas, letting them come up with ideas for each of these questions so that we could have a discussion on the final day. So this is going to be just day 2 where they're coming up with all of their responses for every single one of the questions. I'm going to go ahead and jot down all of the other responses that I got from students onto these anchor charts so you can see what that looks like at the very end. Okay, so at this point, my hands are exhausted from writing. So now I have added all the responses that my students were able to come up with. Now, obviously, I did not write them very big. If you wanted to write them much larger, for instance, the way that I did here where I used up 2 lines, just so that students are able to see, and of course with a thicker marker may be beneficial so that all of them can read what is happening on these pages. But now you can see every single chart has the answers or responses that my students gave me, and that concludes the second day for building your classroom mission vision statement. The third day is going to be the final day in which you're building your mission vision statement. So at this point, let's just review. Day 1 was looking at what a mission vision statement is by looking at your school's mission vision statement and discussing some of the components for that. The second day is all about getting them to respond to 4 different questions that will help to guide you in crafting your mission and vision statement as a class. So now you are at the part where students then have to vote. So you can't add all of the content that you've placed onto those anchor charts. So this is the part where students will get to read each of the responses from each of the posters, and as a class, vote on which one they feel as though best answers the question on that piece of chart paper. So let's look at some of the ways and talk through some of the ways that I embedded this and managed this inside of my own classroom. So on the day when we were doing our votes, I would represent every single one of the anchor charts that we had crafted together. And then I would read aloud the question and I would read aloud all of the responses. And I would tell students to think about the answer that they had and to give me a thumbs up over their heart so that I knew that they were ready to go to do their vote. And again, I had my partner teacher who was there with me, but as we were going through this, I would read it aloud, students would raise their hand, and then we would count it and put the number off to the side. So here's the responses that I received from my students on what they believed which one was best. And out of these, you can see that the 15 and the 16 were pretty close. And so what we decided to do as a class is to integrate both of them. So we chose this one and we chose this one. And so we would circle the responses with the highest. So either one response, or if you wanted to make a judgment call as a class, you could do two different responses. And we did this for all of them. So for these, again, I would read them out loud. They would think about which response they wanted to vote for, and then we would read each one. Students would raise their hands and they would vote. Now, on this one, we had 7 and 7, so I circled both of these for our part of why do we want to learn. When we got to these, same process yet again, we would have everyone think as we would share these out first. And then we would let them vote on which one they felt as though was the best. So this one was the highest. However, we had a discussion as a class because one student said, but don't you think that this one is the most important here? Being a better person instead of just being successful. Like, yes, we want to be successful, but at the end of the day, we want to be really good people. And so we decided to put a star next to it that even though it only received one vote, we still felt as though it was important to include in our mission and vision statement. And so for the final one, again, students were able to vote for each of these, and then we had our highest number here. Once you got to that point of voting for each of the areas, then came the process of drafting your mission vision statement. Now, you could do this through the process of shared writing. And within shared writing, this is where you and the students both hold the pen at some point. This can be both literally and figuratively, meaning you might ask for students to just kind of chime in on how they want to word particular sentences or what words they want to add into that sentence to complete it. Or you can have them come up and literally hold the pen and write the mission vision statement. Now, whatever you choose to do, just know that if you do have students coming up and writing out the mission vision statement itself, it is going to take a little bit more time because they're standing up, you're handing them the pen, you're waiting for them to write. So depending on the time frame and how much you have, you may just choose to go ahead and write this for the class and let them chime in on how to draft it. So to make this process a little bit more easy, I'm going to share with you the model of my mission and vision statement as I read it out to you. So here's what our mission vision statement read as. Our mission statement. We come to school to learn and to think about what we want to be when we grow up. This will help us move on in life and go to college so that we can be successful and be a better person. This will allow us to help people and our family. So we had all of these components inside of our mission statement. So we had to learn, to get an education, to think about what we want to be when we grow up, to move on in life, to go to college, to be successful, to be a better person, to help people and our family. all of those were embedded into that mission statement. Now, to make this a little bit easier for you, you can try and craft it with those sentence starters that I have within my own. So you might start it with, we come to school to, and then add in what they've placed in. So we're rephrasing the question that's on our anchor charts. This will help us, and then you can add in the remainder, and then this allows us to be able to add in that final piece. So hopefully this has been helpful, just understanding how to kind of craft this with a classroom. The final thing that I ended up doing is I printed this out onto a poster size paper. So if you don't have the accessibility of getting a poster printed at your school, you can utilize Adobe just by going to the print. You can do multiple pages, and then typically I do about 150 to 200, maybe 190 for the percentile range for how to increase it. And then you just want to make sure that you have your 0.005 for the over piece, so that way you can have like the overlay and you're not trying to like piece it up perfectly. So that makes it a little bit easier. And then all I did is I put them all together, I glued them together, and then I had them laminated within my school. But before you have them laminated, I think this is the most important part of all of it, is that you want to have your students sign it. So it's important to read this with them, get them to confirm it, and then have everybody around the edges sign the mission and vision statement, and then laminate it and post it up in your classroom. Now, it's not just enough to be able to post it inside of your classroom and to say, all right, this is our mission vision statement. I expect everybody to do this all the time. That's not reasonable, because we all know that we are human beings. We make mistakes, and just as adults we make mistakes, students will also make mistakes in your classroom. So it's important that as a teacher, you're always going back to your mission and vision statement. Always, whenever you're either redirecting students or redirecting the entire class, talking about, hey, here's our mission and vision statement. Here's what we said we're doing. Are we creating this place as an environment to learn? No, because we're distracting others and we're not focused. Are we doing this to get an education so that we can be better people? No. Okay, identifying what you're not doing as a class that relates back to that mission and vision statement, and then how you can make some of those changes as a class so that you can be upholding what you all said at the very beginning of the year. So you constantly have to come back to it over and over and over again. All right, so that is it for this video. I hope that you guys enjoyed looking at this process overall. Remember, if you are within the community, you have access to all of the posters, including the document that I utilized in order to create my final mission and vision statement. It's editable, so you can go in, add your own mission and vision statement, get that printed, and then have your students sign it and post it up inside of your classroom. Thank you all so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe the video, and hit that notification bell so you can get notified when I upload a brand new video. Thanks again. I will see you all next time. Bye.